Willson Contreras is putting the time in at first base at Cardinals camp. We'll tell you how it went on Tuesday and what the upside for Willson Contreras could possibly be now that he is no longer a catcher. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Another day at Cardinals camp as full squad workouts roll along for the second day of the week after things kicked off on Monday. It's a fun vibe down here. Watching the guys go about their drills on the infield is kind of the way the day starts out. And then pretty consistently, we've got some live batting practice and live pitching practice to take in, which is really the closest thing you get to legitimate baseball before the games begin. And it is teammate versus teammate, but it's fun to see that competition for some of these guys that are maybe trying to feel their way through this camp and maybe find a spot. Whether that's a prospect looking to make an impact or a player that's been around for a little while, but one that's looking to cement his role for the team in 2025. You've got a number of those types of players down here. And today was an interesting one. I want to talk today on the show about Tekoah Roby, who I made a point to watch as much of his live pitching practice as I possibly could. Was facing a number of big league caliber bats over there, including Jordan Walker, Victor Scott II, Michael Ciani, and Pedro Pages. So that was an interesting group to see Tekoah Roby face off against. Got to see a little bit of Andre Palante, not as much Miles Michaelis, and some Sem Robertson as well at the end. But Roby was probably the arm that stood out the most to me, so I want to give you a little bit of my take on what we saw today and maybe how to contextualize that and maybe not go too far overboard. But look, we're going to react to what we see. Just maybe trying not to overreact to good or bad. But in the case of Roby, I do think it's interesting because for a guy that's been kind of tabbed as a minor league starter in the past, could this be a year where the Cardinals say, hey, if he's healthy, let's see if those bullets can't be used in a relief role in St. Louis? I don't know if it's too far-fetched to potentially see Tekoah Roby with the St. Louis Cardinals at some point this year, and whether this ends up being a spring for him that can sort of catapult him toward a possible debut in 2025. As I record this podcast, I don't think I have. I know I haven't. I have not yet posted any of the video from Tekoah Roby's live. My plan, though, and we'll see if it's executed the way that I intend. I'm going to post that before going to bed. I think here on Tuesday. This podcast will be live around 6 a.m. for most listeners. I am going to make it members only available right away, though. Just another kind of way to offer a perk to our members here on the YouTube channel. If you want to support the channel, if you want to support the work that I'm doing with it and covering the Cardinals this year, you can check out that link in the video description below to join the channel membership. And at the b-schaeff Daily Gang tier, we still do have the Discord rolling, and you can join the private lounge group chat for the Discord. So just a very small way to contribute to what we're doing here if it's something that interests you, and if it's not, no big deal. But try to throw a bone to the members and say, hey, for people that sometimes want to make sure to listen to the podcast right when they're available, right after they're recorded, I'm going to make this one staggered a little bit with some of the videos from camp. Normally, I would be posting the podcast before going to bed, but I want to get that Tekoah Roby video out there and in front of everybody's eyeballs before tomorrow. We have a whole new crop of pitchers and players that are doing great things at camp to be able to highlight. So that's kind of the content plan. Hope you guys have been checking out Sports Hub STL as well. Had a great time this afternoon again with Mike Claiborne and Joe Roderick for Cards Hub 365. Talked about the Rafael Devers situation in Boston. We talked about Ivan Herrera and impressions from his situation as he embarks upon this 2025 season with the Cardinals. So a lot of good stuff there over on Sports Hub STL. I even joined Brooke and Randy on Tuesday morning for their show. So a lot of good Cardinals content over on Sports Hub STL. Make sure to check it out and to check out the website where I've written a couple of articles over the past day over Michael McGreevy and some Arenado stuff. So lots of good content if you guys are into that. Let's go ahead, though, and get right into it. Willson Contreras, he was the guy to watch, in my opinion, earlier today because I spent more of my time on, I guess it was Monday, honed in on Nolan Arenado. And then I thought, might go on the other side of the diamond and see what Willson is up to as he is acclimating to a brand new position. He's been on the infield dirt for his entire career, but it's been behind the plate, and now a little bit of a difference being out in the field, and you get a sense of how really athletic Willson Contreras is. And we've talked about how he's put on some more weight It seems like good weight. It seems like he's added muscle. When you're up close and personal next to him, you see it. And I really do think it can be a benefit for him at the plate, which really, as much as he's going to try to make those strides defensively at first base, this is more about getting his bat in the lineup as often as possible than anything else. Like, keeping him healthy into his 30s, I think is going to be important because he was the Cardinals' best hitter statistically last year. Better than 800 on the OPS. That's not something that many Cardinals the last couple of years have been able to say, and he's been pretty consistent when healthy, when on the field, and when in the lineup as far as what he can do offensively. And it was interesting to hear from Ollie Marmol this morning, even before we got a chance to look at Willson and the way that he was acclimating in the field, which I'll give you my impressions of here in a moment. But I do think that this could be a move to first base that actually helps to facilitate and maybe unlock another level to Willson offensively. I know it's maybe just one of those things that you won't be able to know until we see it, and we can certainly speculate on the direction that it could go. It may seem a little bit far-fetched to ask for more out of Willson offensively than what he's provided for the Cardinals the last couple of years. But if you think about it, the commitment of and the preparation involved in being a catcher at the big league level is so much more than just what you'd have to do as a first baseman. Although I think he's going to have to continue to put time in to be passable or even good over there defensively at first base. That's not just going to happen overnight. It's going to be a lot of continued work, I think, throughout the year, honestly. But that's about it. Like, you don't have to game plan. You don't have to think about the next team coming in and what the scouting reports are on their entire lineup and what the strength of your three pitchers are and the guys out of your bullpen are, the guys that end up getting called up randomly, and you have to learn those guys and what their repertoire is. A lot of the time that can be spent by a catcher is going to now be freed up for Willson Contreras. And does that unlock something new for his game offensively? I think is a fair question in terms of what the upside is, and it's one that was asked, I believe this was by Derek Gould earlier on Tuesday, and so I want to play the answer from Ollie Marmol for you to that one, and then I'll give you a little bit of an insight as to what I thought of Willson Contreras and his defense today, although you could check out some of the video that we put up on the channel earlier on Tuesday if you're wanting to see some reps from Willson and guys like Alec Burleson too over at first base. But let's go ahead and get to that question and answer. Oliver Marmol talking about what's the upside potentially for a Willson Contreras offensively now that the demands of the catcher position are no longer part of his job description.
What's the upside offensively for Willson?
I think it's high. I mean, when you think about the catching position and all that goes into it, there's a lot of preparation. And I'm not talking about preparation day of. We're talking about preparation days leading into that game where you're getting ready for a new lineup every 3 games. You're getting ready for, a lot of different things that are going to be thrown your way of how to navigate a lineup, the guys on the bench, new pitcher coming from AAA that you're having to learn on the fly to make sure you're using him properly and calling the right pitches and what his strengths and weaknesses are. So there's this constant prep work for a catcher that takes away from, you only have so many minutes in the day, and it takes away from other areas. So for Willson to not have to worry about that side of it and just get ready to thump, it could be fun.
There's Cardinals manager Ollie Marmol from earlier Tuesday talking about the benefit potentially of having Willson Contreras no longer behind the plate in terms of what it could do for his game offensively. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you track with and think could be realistic. Honestly, the Cardinals don't need more from Contreras. They just need more games from him, more plate appearances, and I think this is a positional switch that could potentially provide that. His numbers, though, the last 2 seasons, he really has been the Cardinals' best hitter during kind of a downturn couple of campaigns for St. Louis. 826 was his OPS his first year with the Cardinals in 23. And this past year, he had an 848 OPS. He was tracking, if you'll recall, toward potential all-star game, potential Silver Slugger consideration, and the couple of stints on the injured list that he spent really tanked him. Just 84 games played, 358 plate appearances, but still had 15 home runs, and the rate stats were tremendous with the 848 OPS, his highest since he was an all-star back in 2019 with the Cubs. So I don't think he needs to do more than that necessarily, but if he can match that 840, 850 OPS and just do it in more like 130 games and 550-plus plate appearances instead of 80 games and 350 on the plate appearances, then I think the Cardinals would be pretty darn pleased with what the production he could bring to the lineup could be. And again, taking some of that other stuff off of his plate. The Cardinals did sign him originally to be a catcher, but that was during a period where Ivan Herrera had kind of had a down year in the minors before that. I got a little bit of big league time, as I recall it, the year that Yachty was a little banged up, was not always available. And you remember, I believe it was Austin Romine that the Cardinals at one point felt compelled to call up to the big leagues when Yachty was down for the count, just to kind of get some coverage back there behind the plate. And it was just a situation at the time where Ivan Herrera just was not maybe ready for what it looked like at the big league level, the preparation that goes into it, the difference between the minors and the majors. And it's something that is hard to kind of quantify until you see it, until you experience it. Some players need that kind of kick in the teeth to be able to say, okay, now that I've seen what it looks like, I can make the adjustment. But until it's one of those deals where you don't know what you don't know until you experience it. And I think that kind of happened a little bit for Ivan Herrera. And I've talked about it where I think this was even this morning, so maybe I haven't brought this up on the podcast yet. So I'll do it now. With this position battle, Pedro Pagés, Ivan Herrera, I have maintained, I think both guys are going to about split the catching duties 50-50. Maybe I would be more savvy to predict that Ivan Herrera will get the opening day start, just because I think the Cardinals are going to give him a little bit of that runway that we've been talking about. Not that Pedro Pagés is not also a young player, but the upside attached to Herrera because of what he can do offensively could earn him that spot on opening day. We'll obviously see what the camp battle looks like and how both those guys look in games. But Ivan Herrera had an 800 OPS last year. That's a 124 OPS plus, 24% above league average, and in obviously not a ton of career plate appearances at the big league level, 325. He's got a 114 OPS plus, so he is a legitimate big league hitter, and finding ways to get him in the lineup I think is going to be a priority. But with Arenado at third and two lefties in a similar spot in Gorman and Burleson, where I don't know that either of them have an obvious position unless the Cardinals end up putting Newt Barr in center field more frequently, you may be in a situation as Ivan Herrera where you need to be able to win the job above Pedro Pagés to get the opportunities to show what you can do offensively, because there's not going to be as many DH spots to go around, and certainly against what you'll face predominantly, which is right-handed pitching, there's two left-handed sticks that are looking for that opportunity and I think are going to be more likely to receive it on a regular basis than Herrera. But you can probably pencil Herrera in for some opportunities against left-handed pitching as the DH. And I would like to think that the Cardinals, and this is not a question I have figured out how to ask appropriately yet to get the answer I'm looking for and the insight I'm hoping to glean, but will the Cardinals be willing to, in those specific circumstances against lefties, would they DH Ivan Herrera and start Pagés at catcher in order to fit both right-handed bats in the lineup and do it willingly, knowing that they don't necessarily have another catcher on the bench, but they also kind of do if Willson Contreras is playing first base or, whatever the case would be on a given day, and could switch to catcher if there was a dire situation where both other catchers got injured. And then the next day, it's not like Willson would have to revert back to being an everyday catcher. You would just call up the other catchers from the AAA or whatever the case might be and get anybody on the IL that's no longer able to play every single day. I think the Cardinals should be comfortable doing that, but I'm not entirely sure it's something they've completely thought through yet. And if they have, we just haven't asked about it. And that's something I want to try to remind myself to ask about here soon. But I bring all this up because I think Willson Contreras, when it comes to his offensive numbers, can be a real threat this year because he's got the catcher stuff being delegated to other people. He doesn't have to worry about those things anymore. Whereas Ivan Herrera really is going to have to make that a fine point of what he's looking to do this year in order to earn the opportunity to just be in the lineup in general because of the squeeze that could exist there on the DH spot. But I asked Ali Marmol this morning, we talk a lot about the throwing arm for Herrera, and he's gone to Driveline and different places in the offseason to really work on that aspect of things. So hopefully it's something that looks a lot different, revamped his throwing motion, like completely changed it from the ground up. They rebuilt it. That was some things that those were some things that Mike Claiborne was talking about after having a conversation with Herrera earlier today, which we discussed on Cards Hub 365 with Sports Hub STL. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation as to how much Herrera looks improved with the throwing arm. But I asked Oli Marmol, is there anything else about his defense that you guys are kind of focusing on, or was it mainly got to be able to manage the run game better. And he said, no, his framing looks better. There are aspects of his preparation that, they think are trending in the right direction. They want to see what it looks like. What does that revamped throwing motion look like to be able to control the running game? And I do think a part of this conversation, and look, it's already been on the schedule this spring where the Cardinals pitchers are obviously doing PFP. They're working on all the infield drills, pop-ups, covering bunts, all those sorts of things. But tipping pitches was also another thing that they're, and that's not uncommon. It was true last year, but I think this year, even more important to be able to hone in and make sure nobody's tipping, and throwing motion is another thing that, like, you got to be quick to the plate to be able to give your catchers a chance. And I think that was a staff-wide conversation that needs to be fine-tuned this spring relative to what they were able to do last year, where it just seemed like the pitchers weren't doing a great job of controlling the running game and giving, regardless of who was behind the plate, those guys a real opportunity to stop those base stealers. So we'll end up seeing what that looks like. But as for Willson Contreras, I would say that defensively looks athletic at first base, where there are a few plays that, were tough grounders to his side that you would say he booted or he, wasn't able to complete the play. That happened a couple of times. I don't think it's anything crazy. But what I was really encouraged by was seeing the conversation. And even somebody like Alec Burleson has not played a ton of first base at this high level, but has some familiarity with the position in his career, was kind of dropping little nuggets to Willson about, on this type of play, when we run this bunt defense, you can afford to be aggressive in this spot because your responsibility is this, rather than needing to worry about, covering the bag or whatever. You can charge it aggressively. Oliver Marmol was out there and talking to both Burley and Willson about certain plays and certain things that they want to see look aggressive. They want to see if the Cardinals are making errors defensively right now at this part of camp. If they're making mistakes, it's out of almost a recklessness with how aggressive they're being, trying to make the play and push the boundaries of what's possible. And that's something that I always talked about, wanting that to be sort of a theme of the camp. But it was cool to see those interactions and got to see a little bit of that in the video that I posted. If you have checked out the Willson Contreras video on the channel from earlier Tuesday, even at part of it, I think this made the video potentially, I'm trying to remember exactly, but Willie calls Oliver back over. He says, Oliver, I had a question about something. They were kind of talking shop. I think that ended up being like the thumbnail image that I used when those two guys got together and we're having a conversation. So I just think there's the right kind of things are happening down here in terms of being able to get Willson Contreras acclimated to a new position. I was encouraged by what I saw out there, and we'll continue to update you on what I see and what stands out about this process. We talked about on the Card Sub show, and maybe I might have mentioned it last night on the pod, but Thomas Sajaci and Arenado are two guys that are stationed over there at the hot corner when they're doing drills, and Sajaci's getting a chance to glean some wisdom from Nolan, and those guys are talking shop about hitting, talking about, just a variety of topics that I feel like that can only be something that helps a younger player like Thomas Sajaci being exposed to that sort of thing. So it's all looking the way that it's supposed to, Cardinals fans. Like we say, we don't want to overreact to anything. Don't necessarily underreact either, though. Just because something isn't, the ultimate thing that's going to change the season doesn't mean we can't talk about it or mention it. So that's what we're trying to do, give you an idea and a glimpse into what's going on down here at Cardinals camp. But did want to talk about a little bit of Tekoah Roby's day before we get out of here. And again, without overreacting, and look, if there's a pitcher who maybe doesn't have a great day, I'll be able to kind of give it to you in a way that's still fair to the pitcher, where it's like the other day I was talking about Quinn Matthews, Tink Hence, and said, yeah, Quinn Matthews had a little bit of command issues, was probably just, ramped up for that first live session, but then walking off the field said, I got behind some of those hitters, whatever. It is what it is. Like, guys take it in stride and have the right attitude about it. I think that's almost as important as what the outcomes were in these simulated moments that aren't really games. They're not even really, like I said, as close to games as you can get on the backfields, but at the same time, still guys are tweaking things, trying to learn things, just trying to get acclimated for their season and make sure the stuff is feeling right, working on things that maybe if we're just judging the results of these moments that you see on video, you're not getting the full context of what's always trying to be accomplished behind the scenes. So important to remember those things. But when it comes to Tekoah Roby, had a swinging strikeout of Michael Ciani where he was throwing it by him. Had a couple of strikeouts where, in the case of Jordan Walker, there was one kind of funny moment where he took a pitch that was, I thought, a little bit low, but whoever was umpiring, whether it was the catcher or the coach behind the screen, says, strike 3 or whatever. Walker just kind of immediately starts shaking his head as he walks off, and the guys all kind of start laughing. Ollie Marmol was there watching too, just chuckling. And Jordan says, I would never swing at that pitch. So even Jordan Walker, in the simulated moment, he strikes out, right? But it's a case of he knows what he's trying to accomplish when he's up there in the box, and it's not going to do Jordan Walker any good to swing at a pitch that's not his pitch to swing at. Even if there are, technically 2 strikes on him in this spot in the middle of February on the backfields of Jupiter, Florida, you're going to not necessarily just sell out to say, I'm going to try to swing at a pitch that's not the type of pitch I want to be swinging at to develop the plate discipline that I want. So those sorts of things are certainly happening, but I think it's okay to be impressed too when a young pitcher like Tekoah Roby, who has, had some difficulty staying on the field and dealing with injuries over the recent seasons, has a day like he did out there today. I thought that was definitely something to make a note of. Roby didn't have really a full season in 2024, and in 2023 was also dealing with injury that year when the Cardinals acquired him at the trade deadline. So one of those things that he's coming into camp after starting just 10 total games last year between Palm Beach and Springfield, and had a combined ERA of, 6.5 basically in 38 innings, but struck out more than a guy per inning. So the stuff is still something that I think stands out. He is going into his age 23 season. Has he turned 23? Yeah, he's 23 years old. He'll turn 24 in September, and is facing major league guys. It wasn't the gauntlet of Arenado, Donovan, Nootbaar, Contreras that we saw McGreevy end up against on Monday, but Tekoah Roby taking on Jordan Walker, Pedro Pages, Michael Ciani, and Victor Scott II. Those are all big league caliber names, so it's kind of notable to see what the results are, even if you don't want to get carried away with them in either direction, good or bad. Guy hits a home run, doesn't mean the pitcher stinks. Guy strikes out, doesn't mean the batter stinks, but it's worth noting, all right, this pitcher had a confident day, and Tekoah Roby threw a couple of simulated innings. I thought did have a confident day, and like I said, you can already, if you're listening to this podcast, it means that the Roby video of his live BP/PP, pitching practice, batting practice, depends on your perspective, has already been posted to the YouTube channel, so check it out. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't looked at it, that's like a 20-minute long video. It's not just Roby. It's a bunch of different stuff I saw in the backfields and a lot of the lives that I tried to capture and just give you guys an idea for what's going on down here. But I thought Roby definitely stood out. Sem Robertson, had some good stuff going. I don't remember there being any particularly damaging contact against him. Ivan Herrera, when I did see him take some swings, I think it was against Palante. Herrera had some good swings for sure. Not 100% sure if anybody hit home runs today. I think Nolan Gorman might have had one against Michaelis, but I was over on the other field watching Tekoah Roby at the time. So that wasn't something that I saw, but I heard other reporters kind of talking about it. And I would say, of the hitters, it's kind of hard to necessarily remember all the different moments of contact. Pedro Pages was making some solid contact again. Victor Scott, I got a chance to ask him after the workouts today sort of what his impressions were of Tekoah Roby, and he talked about his competitive mindset and being a guy that, has obviously really good stuff, kind of talked about his repertoire and the fastball that gets up on you, has some good off-speed stuff. But Victor Scott, his impressions of Roby are that's a guy that who has that competitive mindset that's going to allow him to be successful. And really for me, I think it's in whatever role they put him in. Had him go in multiple innings, so he's still kind of in that bucket with the starters. Is that an indication that he's maybe going to crack the rotation at AAA to start the season? Is it a deal where he's going to still be back in Springfield where, AA, he did pitch 7 starts last year, I think it was, looking at the box scores, but didn't have great success. So maybe not necessarily someone they'll elevate. But what if they're looking at Tekoah Roby and he's having a really good Grapefruit League? Maybe he gets some opportunities against some other big league caliber guys from other organizations when he's out there in the spring games. And if he looks good, what would that look like in shorter bursts? You don't want to impact his health if he's finally feeling like he's into a routine, and was waiting around today, but because of the various different shows that I do, I was not able to talk with Roby after we kind of got booted from the clubhouse. We get a certain length of time for availability after workouts, but Roby was eating and doing some post work stuff, so I just didn't get a chance to grab him. But I'll be curious if tomorrow I could find him and ask him how he things went today and how he's approaching this spring. If I do, you'll hear about it here and you'll be able to read about it more on Sports Hub STL. But I thought it was a good day for Tekoah Roby. Trying not to overreact to anything, but he's in that bucket where I would wonder if the Cardinals would take a guy like him, a guy like Gordon Graceffo, maybe even Sam Robertson, guys that have been minor league starters. And if there's an opportunity in the bullpen where you think they can make an impact and can get the most out of what they have in their repertoire in shorter bursts, would that be a consideration for some of these guys? And to me, Roby would be on that list. But I could very easily ask Ollie Marmol in the morning, hey, Roby, what do you think? And is he somebody in that starter bucket, or could he be somebody that you later on, as you kind of trim out the starters and what that looks like, could he be somebody you look at in shorter bursts? Because I think there's a quicker upward mobility if some of these guys are bullpen options. Whereas a McGreevy, I think they're pretty locked and loaded, ready for him to be stretched out, and whether it's at AAA or in the rotation to start the year in St. Louis, I don't think McGreevy is somebody that's necessarily going to be considered for the bullpen. But some of those other guys down the pecking order, better to have a big league opportunity sooner rather than wait around. And a guy like Graceffo especially has kind of, not to say stalled out at AAA, but like, what more is he proving down there? We kind of know what it looks like at that level. And sometimes the guys just need that jump where they get more consistent big league opportunity, and that can allow them to maximize their stuff and really see what it plays like at the highest level. So those are my thoughts from the Cardinals camp on Tuesday. Willson Contreras, Tekoah Roby, Andre Palante, different guys that you will get a glimpse at if you scroll back to the other videos on the YouTube channel from Tuesday. But appreciate you guys for listening. Appreciate your support. Check out the Discord. The link is below. Link to channel memberships is below. And don't forget to check out all the Sports Hub STL content that's going on over on that YouTube channel. It used to be Charlie Marlowe's channel. Now it's Sports Hub. So if you subscribe to Charlie, you should already be getting the stuff in your feed. Randy and Brooke with their show, 10 a.m. Central every day. And I'll be on Cards Hub 365 again on Wednesday, but plenty more days to come with that show, typically around 1 p.m. And then after games start down here, we'll sometimes have to adjust that. But stay tuned if you're enjoying that kind of Cardinals content too. Thank you guys so much. Once again, couldn't do it without you, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.